Darak and Solila's long trek through the Void's wasteland turns hopeful, and then it turns nasty when they meet a new ally and confront an old enemy. We're going to talk about it in Void Rivals number 9 from Image Comics. See you in 3. Welcome back to Comical Opinions. This is our review of Void Rivals number 9. Let's take less than 60 seconds to recap what happened in issue number 8. Darak and Solila were making their way through the wastelands, trying to get to some midpoint that Darak has in his memory, when they were ambushed by Proximus, a android cyborg type of mercenary or bounty hunter, possibly Solila's brother, but we're not quite sure. Darak used Handroid to set off a last resort explosion when things were getting pretty nasty and blew Proximus far, far away, and Solila as well. Unfortunately, Solila happened to land right on Proximus's spear, possibly killing her. That brings us to Void Rivals number 9. Darak runs over to Solila to see if she's alive, what he can do to help her, and she is still surviving. She manages to yank the spear out of her side, and it allows her suit to seal up the wound, but she's bled a lot and pretty well damaged, so they have to set off with her in a pretty bad state. We cut over to a tug at your heartstrings moment when we catch up with the Skuxoid, who originally saved Darak and Solila from their crash site in the first couple of issues. He returns home after having a really tough time with the Quintessence in recent issues, and his joyful return is met by nothing but a cold, empty house, and presumably Skuxoid's family has been killed or left, and he's just sitting there in the dark alone, ready to embrace the loneliness. We cut back to Darak and Solila. Darak is propping her up as they drag their way through the wastelands, but eventually she passes out, and he's forced to pick her up and carry her. And eventually, even though it's a tough walk, he gets to his destination. It appears to be an abandoned depot station of some sort, which is where he wound up when he was lost in the wasteland in the flashback several issues back. And it turns out the reason he remembers it is because he was rescued back then, as he is now, by Springer, the tri-changing transformer of Autobot lineage, and he's offering to give them a hand, even though he doesn't quite know what to do because these are organic beings and they're trying to sort themselves out. Before Darak can work with Springer to give Solila the medical attention she needs, Springer is attacked by Proximus, who has finally caught up to them. And you'd think, well, a tiny Proximus who's about human size, or at least the size of Darak and Solila, would be no match for Springer, but apparently he is. That cyborg body's got loads of strength and power. So all of a sudden, now we have a fight between Springer and Proximus, and it's more evenly matched than you would expect. And then the fight continues, but we don't know how it's going to play out because that's where the issue concludes. Cut to an epilogue where we have the Quintessence who have been examining the temporary sort of cobbled together ship that Solila and Darak used to escape their crash in the first issue, and it turns out that they recognize the alloys that are in the metal, and that recognition brings up an ancient name that the Quintessence are not happy about hearing. It is Zerta Trion. So there you have it. It's a pretty quick issue. Let's talk about the technicalities, starting with the character development. Darak is really the guy that steps up and rises to the occasion as he's forced to carry Solila through the wastelands, and he begs for her well-being and safety when they finally catch up with Springer. On the flip side of that, the unexpected bit of character work comes in the form of the Skuxoid, where he earns quite a bit of sympathy and just sort of empathy, if you will, when he comes home after a really long, harrowing experience to find an empty house and being totally alone. Moving over to the artwork, Lorenzo De Felici's art style hits the nail on the head. You've got good alien character designs that feel grounded and look familiar, but still feel alien and separate from everything that might be going on in any kind of human capacity or anything that we're used to seeing. Patricio Del Pesce's coloring application is very well done. From an overall cleanliness and detail and sharpness and clarity, this series has improved from issue to issue to issue, so that's a good thing. On the downside, Del Pesce's color selections, not the application, not how it's shaded and applied, but just the color choices, overall feel very drab and dark. This is a lot of grays and greens and olive greens and dark purples. So the overall look of the book is just kind of drab. I'm not sure why there's an aversion to pop and variety in the color choices. But yeah, this is an overall, it's a very dark looking comic book. Moving over to pacing and structure, Kirkman's story and pacing are just rock solid from start to finish. Darak's trek to carry Solila through the wasteland, you'd think that would just be a long, slow, kind of a plodding pace. But Kirkman uses that space to get some peppy banter going on between Darak and his handroid to kind of figure out what's going on and what their next steps are and what their options are, especially when handroid is sort of encouraging Darak to keep going when his body's starting to give out from carrying Solila that entire time. In terms of just the overall plot of where this issue sits in the overall series, it's still not quite clear where this series is going. Kirkman's laying it out in a way that the series isn't going towards some major goal that we're aware of. It's just handling the story in terms of short-term milestones. Let's get to the next thing, and let's accomplish this next goal, and let's accomplish this next thing over here. So you're getting the satisfaction level of completing the story in bite-sized chunks rather than a big story that feels like it's moving towards some eventual endpoint. And so some readers may like that, some may not. So you don't really feel like you're headed somewhere so much as you're just completing short hops. Talking about the theme, it's not particularly obvious, or at least blatantly obvious, but the growing theme of this issue is all about loyalty, particularly coming from Darak. He's increasingly going to extremes and doing things that are out of his way or put him in harm's way to protect her, to defend her, to provide for her and look after her. It's unclear if Kirkman intends to use this issue, or at least this series, to develop some kind of romantic relationship. There's definitely a bond forming, or at the very least some mutual respect. They may or may not go romantic. It's not clear at this point, but you can see the seeds of that circumstance planted so that if they go that direction, it makes sense. Now for the big question, where does this series start to fit within the greater Energon universe? Except for the fact that a Transformer now appears in the issue as a member of the cast, not just somebody as a quick cameo. It's starting to feel a little bit more like it's part of the greater interconnected Energon universe, but it's still very far away from everything else that's going on Earth, particularly between the G.I. Joe and the Transformers. So it's part of that universe, but it's still sort of separate and in its own little corner. Now, at the end of Cobra Commander number 5, which came out this week, there is a scene involving Pythona from Cobra Law, which may bridge that gap. That's a guess, it's a theory, but it's possible. So even though Void Rivals is still in its own corner, an opportunity has presented itself to kind of bring that in and make it feel like it's part of a larger story. Final thoughts, what do we think about Void Rivals number 9? You get engaging spacefaring action, peppy dialogue, and not in a humorous way, but just it's snappy and it keeps you engaged. And so far this issue has the biggest Transformers presence yet in the spinoff. Kirkman's script is tight, it moves well, it's entertaining, and the art team's visuals are also very solid. Maybe dark and drab, but the overall presentation is still feels like it's crisp and sharp. Therefore, we're going to give Void Rivals number 9 from Image Comics and Skybound an 8.2 out of 10. Leave a comment down below. I want to know what you think about this series as a whole and this issue. Do you like that it's part of the Energon universe, but still in its own corner and not really connected to anything else? Or do you wish that it sort of came together a little bit more? Leave a comment down below. Let us know. Also, please like, share, comment, subscribe, and stay tuned through the outro for our next review.